S'more Murder, Book 1 of the Camping Girl Cozy Mystery Series, written by Josephine Bintema, narrated by Josephine Bintema. I found this in Grandma's post box in the office of the campground. Blake's face grew serious as he read the note. He looked it over thoroughly, then checked the envelope. When? I got it yesterday, but only opened it this morning, I replied. Has anyone seen it? His serious eyes looked into mine. No, I shook my head. I thought I should let you see it first. I'm wondering if the same person who burnt down Dixon's trailer also killed my grandmother. I'm going to take this to the station for analyzing. Blake reached over, opening the glove compartment. He set the letter in, closing the compartment door and locking it with his keys. You're keeping it? I was a little alarmed. I had hoped to be able to have Thelma, Bea, and Conrad look at it. Perhaps they would find something in the letter that I hadn't. This letter is evidence, Ivy, responded Blake. He reached out a hand, covering mine with his. Are you okay? It must have been scary to read those words on the note. It was, I agreed. Once I got over the fear, I find I'm a little angry. I don't like to think of my grandmother being threatened. Has anyone threatened you? Questioned Blake. Not really, I shrugged. It seemed silly to confess that maybe someone had been watching me last night. For all I knew, Cookie and Cupcake had been barking at a raccoon. Just because it had felt ominous didn't mean that someone had been lurking in the shrubbery. If anything like this happens again, I want you to tell me right away, Blake told me as he gave my hand a small squeeze. I'm here for anything you need. I nodded. Thank you. Why don't we go check out the farmer's market? Gently suggested Blake. I've got a list of groceries I need, and Grubbs always has the best stuff. That sounds good. I gave his hand a squeeze back. I could use a few things, too. It was fun exploring the farmer's market. All sorts of booths were lined up in organized squares, displaying various products from clothing, books, and jewelry, to produce, baked goods, dry ingredients, and more. I waved to Thelma, who had a colorful display of jewelry out. A few booths down, I spotted Ava from the crafty corner. Hi, Ava, I greeted her as we approached. Wow, that is a beautiful painting. Thank you, Ava smiled happily, showing off the lakeside scene. It's my latest creation. Do you always have a booth at the farmer's market, I wondered? I thought with having the store uptown you wouldn't have one. Oh, Saturdays are slow uptown because everyone is here, explained Ava. It made sense to close the shop during Saturdays and open a booth here. A lot of tourists come through the farmer's market. Plus, I always give away my business cards, so shoppers know I can be found at the shop if they want to visit later. That makes sense, I agreed. How much for the painting? Asked Blake. It does look beautiful, and I could use something on my living room wall. Unless you wish to purchase it, Ivy. No, I replied with a little regret. I can't afford anything right now, but when I can, I'll certainly think of you, Ava. Blake and Ava worked out a price. He arranged to pick up the picture at her shop later. Moving on, we found Jackson Grubbs selling fresh fruits and vegetables that were in season. His strawberries looked large and juicy. The key is the soil, Jackson boasted with pride. Take care of the soil, and the plants will take care of you. This is the first crop coming in. Keep coming back as we get new crops maturing each week. I decided on a basket of assorted items as Blake made his own selections. Everything looked wonderful and fresh. Paying and complimenting a beaming Jackson, we wandered the large area. It's always fun to see what people are doing here. For instance, that booth is new. Blake pointed to a booth that was full of impressive glassware. I recognized some of the orbs that looked remarkably familiar. I think that may be the glassblower who did my grandmother's orb, I responded. At Blake's confused look, I explained about the ashes. An orb instead of an urn? Blake looked at the glassware with new light. I'm not certain I would want that. Where do you keep yours? Right now, she's on the dinette table. I had a wry laugh. I'll have to find a spot to put her. I was thinking perhaps the garden, but I'm not sure if the glass is too fragile. We could ask. Blake gestured to the little booth. Agreeing, we went to the glass booth and talked to the young woman who happily informed me that while I might see a little fading in the color of the orb due to sunlight, it should be more than able to handle the weather conditions, as long as I brought it inside before any frosty or freezing weather. Thanking her, Blake and I continued on our way. Getting hungry yet? Inquired Blake. I am, I admitted. Where do you recommend getting something to eat? There's a nice little sitting over this way, which is surrounded by all sorts of food booths, he informed me. It's a great spot to dine, because you can get almost anything for a casual lunch. Wonderful, my stomach growled and we laughed. Lead the way. Mouth-watering aromas greeted me as we found the booths where people were preparing hot lunches for hungry shoppers. Looking over what was available, Blake picked out a couple of breakfast burritos with fries, and I chose a chicken sandwich with cream of mushroom soup. Remarking upon how much fun it had been, we agreed that we might like to have an outing like this one again. Blake's cell phone rang. He looked at the number and grimaced. "I have to get this. Excuse me." I watched as Blake got up from the table and headed away, talking to the phone. Shrugging, I took a sip of my drink and nearly spit it out. It was not what I had ordered. Sighing, I got up and went to the food booth with my drink. "Excuse me, but this isn't what I ordered. Could I get it changed?" "Sure thing," a teenager replied, taking my drink. Within moments, I had the appropriate beverage and was completely satisfied with how it tasted. "Thank you," I said in appreciation, sipping my drink as I made my way back to the small table where lunch still awaited. On the way there, I heard Blake's voice. "You're too impatient. Give me a little time and I can have her indebted to us," he was saying. Blake was between two of the food booths, his back turned to me as he spoke harshly into the phone. "Let her borrow the money. Then we can call the debt due, and she has no way to pay. The campground will be ours. It's a lot easier than covering up after you, Biff. If you do that again, I'll have to tell our partners what's going on, and you don't want that." I paused, listening in disbelief. "Don't worry about Evie. I'll handle her," Blake growled into the phone. "She's my girl, and she knows when to keep her mouth shut. You just get the paperwork ready to be signed. We're going to make a lot of money." Scared that Blake might catch me eavesdropping, I quickly melted into the crowd, only to see him hang up the phone a moment later. Blake shoved the cell phone into a pocket and deliberately put on a more pleasant face before heading back to where we had been sitting. Biting my lip, I joined him, suddenly not hungry at all. "Where did you go?" a smiling Blake asked. "Needed a little dessert?" "No, I got the wrong drink order," I managed calmly. "They were nice enough to exchange it." "Oh, that's good. I hate it when the food order is wrong," nodded Blake, chewing on a fry. "I always feel bad when I've got to go back to get the right order again, even though it's not my mistake." I forced a laugh. "That's true." "Are you okay?" Blake looked at me with concern. "You're not eating your food." "Honestly, I'm not feeling well." I jumped on the excuse, which was the truth. "I'm so sorry. We were having such a nice time." "Do you want me to take you home?" asked Blake. "I'll box this up and we can go." "No, that's fine." I gave him a sickly smile. "If you don't mind, I would rather you bring me to Thelma's booth. She has a tea which helps for upset stomachs." After the conversation I had just overheard, I didn't want to be in the car alone with him. It appeared both Blake and Biff were working together to get my campground. It made me afraid of what Blake might do, even though he appeared to be the more rational of the pair. I suddenly realized it was unlikely I was ever going to get that threatening letter back. I also doubted Blake would be turning it into as evidence as he told me earlier. Why hadn't I listened to Bea? She had good instincts as far as Blake was concerned. Blake boxed up his meal and offered to box mine. I declined, using the pretext that maybe it had been the chicken or the mushroom soup that had made me unwell. He seemed to buy that excuse. Blake escorted me back to Thelma's booth, where I did my best to look unwell. "Ivy, have you come to give me a hand?" asked Thelma in concern. I put a hand over my abdomen, faking an upset stomach. Truth was, my stomach was a little iffy since the man who had been involved in trying to steal my grandmother's property from her and possibly her death was standing right beside me. "Actually, I'm not feeling well. I was wondering if you had any of that herbal tea for upset stomachs." "I certainly do. Why don't you have a seat and I'll get it fixed right up?" Thelma offered me her folding chair. I gratefully sat while she put on an electric kettle to boil. "Are you sure you're going to be okay?" questioned Blake. He put a hand on my shoulder. I nodded and forced a sickly smile. "Thank you for bringing me to Thelma. She knows exactly what to do when a person has an upset stomach. Before lunch, I had a lovely time with you." "So did I," agreed Blake. "We should do it again soon." "We should," I echoed. Blake told me to feel better, and with my assurance that I was fine with Thelma, he finally left. Thelma pulled up a chair beside me and felt my forehead. "Did yesterday's heat get to you?" I pulled her hand away from my forehead and patted it. "No, I'm not sick, not really." "What happened?" a concerned Thelma questioned. "You looked as though you were having fun earlier." I was. With a sigh, I explained everything that had happened, including the threatening letter, how well the farmer's market date had been going, and the conversation I overheard from Blake. "Are you certain?" a wide-eyed Thelma asked. "He's a policeman. He shouldn't be caught up in this." "He is." I slumped in my seat. "And he's not single, either." "That's a crying shame," sighed Thelma. The worst part is, it's my word against his, I shrugged. No one is going to believe me when I'm talking bad about a policeman that's well liked. And Blake had the letter which threatened Grandma. I'll never get it back. Would you recognize the writing if you saw it again? A shrewd Thelma thoughtfully looked at me. I think so, I replied. Why, what good would that do? It's not like we can go asking for handwriting samples. Honey, we don't have to, laughed Thelma. You've got a guest book full of signatures. Those are your handwriting samples. Find the match and you've got Jeannie's killer. But how do I prove it to Detective Armand? I wondered. Now that's a different problem. Thelma poured tea for both of us. I don't have a solution for that, but I'll think on it. Thank you, Thelma. I carefully knocked her mug with mine and a toast. You're a good friend. Thelma slung an arm over my shoulders. So are you, Ivy. We sipped our tea, and Thelma helped customers until it was time to close. I assisted her by helping her load her various displays and jewelry into the Mercury. Soon enough, Thelma stopped the classic car at my camper. After letting Cookie and Cupcake out to roam in the yard with leashes on, we sat in the two Muskoka chairs and pored over the guest book from the memorial. There were more signatures than I realized, but I was able to discount many of them. What if the killer doesn't sign his name the same as he prints his words? Look for Biff, replied Thelma. My money's on him after that conversation you overheard. He's a foolhardy man, always doing things impulsively. Perhaps he did torch Dixon's camper and threaten Jeannie. I don't see his signature. I frowned, trying to decipher an unintelligible scrawl. What if Biff didn't sign the book? Was he here the day of the memorial? Questioned Thelma. He was, I remembered. Biff threatened me, saying something like, I would be begging to sell the property to him soon enough. That sounds ominous, gasped Thelma. Did you tell Detective Armand? Why, he doesn't seem to believe anything I say, I shrugged. Armand is determined that I'm the killer, and he's unlikely to listen to me when all I have is my word against another person's. You should call him, Thelma decided. You should call the detective and tell him about the threatening letter that you gave to Blake. Maybe it's still in the glove compartment. The police can find out who sent it. If the letter isn't in the glove compartment, then Blake can say I'm a liar, I remarked. If that happens, no one will believe anything I say, least of all Armand. People will take the word of a cop over the word of a murder suspect. I suppose you may be right. Thelma thought for a moment. I think Agatha has the most realistic idea. We need to find the golf club that was used as the murder weapon. It may be the only way to find Ethel's killer. I think Biff and Blake were in it together for Jeannie's death. I simply don't know how we can prove it. Bea is trying to find out what she can about Dixon's trailer burning down, I mentioned. She thinks if we can find out who didn't have an alibi for both the trailer burning down and the night Grandma died, we'll know for certain who the killer is for Grandma. Do you think the same person murdered both Ethel and Jeannie? Wondered Thelma. I shook my head. I don't think so. I wonder if the second killer thought Ethel was Grandma. I just don't know who was away long enough that they didn't know Grandma was dead already before they confronted Ethel, thinking she would be able to sell them the Happy Camper Resort. This makes my head spin, lamented Thelma. Did you manage to get an invitation to the White Oaks Resort and Golf Club? Al is having a party tonight. I did, I bragged, and I can bring a guest. Good, nodded Thelma with a little resolve. When the party's over, we're going to find that missing murder weapon by searching the White Oaks rental shop. Do you have a plan? I asked. I do, smiled Thelma. Get dressed and I'll meet you here with Bea at 7. Bea? I echoed uncertainly. Al stated I could have one guest, not two. It never hurts to stretch some hospitality, shrugged Thelma. Besides, we're going to need a lookout later, and Bea won't do it if she doesn't get to sample the famous White Oaks hors d'oeuvres. Don't worry, no one will notice one extra person. Okay, I decided to trust her. Thelma appeared confident about the idea, and it wasn't as though Al had given me a ticket to be checked at the door. We probably could smuggle Bea in with no one the wiser. From what I understood, the parties at the White Oaks were always crowded. I waved as Thelma left to go unload her jewelry from her car. Looking over my flower beds, I pulled a few weeds that were trying to invade. Soon enough, my stomach growled, and I was reminded that I needed something proper to eat before the party. I settled for toast with eggs, as it was nearing time for Thelma to pick me up, and I still needed to get ready. Grabbing a small black cocktail dress that Molly had stashed in my suitcase before I left, just in case, I smoothed out the short skirt and tried it on. A pair of gold and blue bead earrings, the curls in my hair tweaked a little with a curling iron, and I was set to go. Thelma arrived, honking her horn as I was pulling on a pair of strappy gold sandals. I gave Cupcake a pet and Cookie a wave. You two behave while I'm gone, and we'll have a long walk when I get back. I tossed them a couple of toys out of the bag Herb had given me for the doggies and locked up the trailer. Jumping into the back seat of the Mercury, I greeted Thelma and Bee. Is there a dog-sitter nearby? I asked. A relatively inexpensive one? I feel bad for leaving Cupcake and Cookie in the trailer so much. Lots of people around here will doggy-sit for you, replied Thelma as she put her car in gear. You can trade a service for a little off the rent or bargain something else like your baking. Most of us adore Cupcake and Cookie, as long as you're willing to take them for a walk before we dog-sit to get most of their energy out. How many other campers have dogs? I wondered. Quite a few, Bee responded, although some have cats and others, such as myself, choose not to have a pet. Would there be enough demand to have a small dog park? I leaned forward in excitement at the idea. Somewhere dogs could run and play fetch. That's a good idea, Bee nodded. Get out some of the energy without having to walk 5 miles. It could be done, shrugged Thelma. Might cost a little with the fence and insurance, but it could be a draw for some campers. I know Nettie's Park has dog run, but White Oaks and the Christian campground doesn't. I'll have to see how much it might cost, I decided. I will add it to my list of ideas for improvements. I'm glad you decided to stay, grinned Thelma. It's going to be a lot of hard work, but the Happy Camper Resort is starting to feel like home, I smiled happily. Now, not to interrupt, since we're all pleased that you're staying, Ivy, but about Dixon's fire, interjected Bee. I found out some interesting information. According to Phyllis, the same night the fire happened, Al Fricks and Tom Fricks were on a trip to the city. They had tickets to a play. Al took his wife, Carol, and Tom took his girlfriend, Lizzie. That means the Fricks couldn't have burned the trailer down. Nettie Gladstone has no alibi for that night. Nettie was off for the evening and doing some paperwork, but no one saw her. That's straight from her hired help. Nettie didn't kill Ethel, a confused Thelma tried to understand. Loretta said it was a man. We're talking about who killed Jeannie, sighed Bee. Try to keep up, Thelma. Well, there are just too many murders for me to keep track of who might have killed whom. Annoyed, Thelma defended herself as she drove. What else did you find out? I asked Bee. Bee preened in importance. Biff Rickards was in town both nights. He tends to go in and out of town, says he's got all these developer meetings. Apparently, Biff was already submitted his plans for the Happy Camper Resort property to the town hall, in hopes of getting it pre-approved before he even owns the campground. If Biff was here both nights, he would have no reason not to know Grandma was dead, I pondered. He wouldn't have attacked Ethel, demanding she sell the property to him. Biff has a temper, warned Thelma. I can see him burning down the trailer, but to actually kill someone, I'm not sure he would go quite that far. He threatened me, I pointed out. Biff is a bully and a braggart, acknowledged Bee. He was on his fishing boat both nights. However, Biff was with Blake Davidson on the night the trailer burned down, so I suppose he couldn't have done it, not with a cop watching him. I hesitated. You didn't tell her? It wasn't time, Thelma shrugged, and I thought it should come from you. Tell me what? Frowned Bee. I told her about my disastrous date with Blake and what I had overheard him saying on his phone call with Biff. I summed it up. Biff and Blake are working together. Since they're a team, any alibi they have that involves only each other is a bad one. A corrupt cop, Bee rubbed her hands together, just like in The Bludgeoned Bobby. The novel set in England, and the Englishmen called their policemen bobbies. Great book. Do you think Blake's investors are connected to crime syndicates? Mused Thelma. Maybe the investors are laundering money, and that's why they are investing in Biff's condos, and offered to invest in your idea of a bakery. Or these businessmen expect to get the business indebted enough to them before pulling the rug out from under the new owner, I theorized. The investors could own the business, and they didn't pay the full price for which they could sell or get someone to manage for them. That's despicable, frowned Thelma. Yet why would Blake be caught up in all that? He seems to be an upstanding member of the community. When Blake was on the phone, he said they were going to make a lot of money, I responded. Bee nodded. Policemen don't make that much salary. It's the retirement package that most of them are hoping to stay long enough in the field to receive. In the meanwhile, an officer faces all sorts of threats from criminals. Policing's not an easy job. A person has to have a real desire to serve the community. Blake revealed he had to clean up after Biff and his impulsiveness, I mused. What if Biff did torch Dixon's trailer? Blake had the opportunity to cover up any signs of arson. He's in the police force and could possibly change evidence without too much suspicion. That's possible, an excited bee agreed. It makes sense. I wish I could get a sample of Blake and Biff's handwriting, I sighed. I know I would be able to recognize it if it...
I wonder how many other threats Jeannie got that she never told us about, a sad Thelma murmured as she pulled into the White Oaks Resort and Golf Club.